It's that time again, everybody. It is XP Billionaire time, as long as you're listening to us, of course.
Hello.
Our Yeah, well, welcome to this week's XP Billionaires. This is Ray Thegrim. You just heard Irene Rogue, and Sky Knight is still here with us as well, silent as ever.
Hello.
There we go. All
Guy's
right,
not
there you
dead
go.
yet.
Well, Sky can't be dead today. This is a very, very special day for Sky. Um, So honestly, let's just jump right into it this week. I am not going to be moderating this week's episode. Sky will be, because this is a topic that is very, very special to Sky. So let's let them at it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So, the topic for this week is strategy role-playing games. A topic that is near and dear to my heart. So, SRPGs are a bit of a different beast than what any of us normally play, with the grid-based combat, usually grid-based, on maps, environmental elements and hazards, and the different conventions than either turn-based or action RPGs. What I like about this genre is that it can be both enormously fun and intellectually challenging. So, what I thought we'd do is this week we're going to delve into what we think of them with a few questions that promise to get very different answers from each of us. First up, what do you consider essential in an SRPG? And Rafe, if you could start us out.
Sure. Uh, for me, what is essential in an RPG is speed. And I don't mean the speed stat. That has nothing to do with it. For me, it's really based on how fast things move on the map. So I like I like
It's
when things are
movement,
moving at a really good.
essentially.
Yeah, the movement in and of itself. So, you take a game like Fire Emblem, where when you make a movement, they just zoom right over to that spot at a really, really good pace. That's great. That is excellent. But there's also, like, I always go for, like, to the best and then the worst example of movement, or of anything really. But in this case, for movement, like, I remember this old PS2 hidden gem called Eternal Poison, and the movement on that and the actions that are taken were so sluggish. They were beautiful, but everything just moved at a snail's pace, and I could not.
With Eternal Poison, it was partially movement speed, partially the fact that the maps were huge. So, like, you ended up just traveling, like, just moving characters forward a lot of the time. And it made the maps take forever to do.
No, exactly. And that's one thing. Like, I mean, Fire Emblem, in my opinion, like, some of the maps are so long just for the sheer volume of enemies and location of where you have to go. But that doesn't bother me nearly as much because we're moving so quickly. But there have been several games that just do not do that, and it I can't keep going with them. I can't even consider them as an option if I've seen that's how slow it's moving.
Yeah. I mean, one of Fire Emblem's real strengths is making the maps interesting, and so that you're engaging with the environment, just not only with the enemies. So even if you aren't say engaging with an enemy in a turn, you're having to calculate where things can go, where units can go safely, what avenues need to be blocked off to protect mages or healers or whatever. So um, it's much more interesting than a more open map. Okay, so Irene, what do you think?
So essential in a strategy RPG, huh? So for me, it's more usually like a combination of light strategy elements. Like I've never really been deeply into strategy games, just because and it tends to be because though I'm fine playing games like Neo and Dark Souls, which require you to actually, think a few moves ahead, but at the same time, like be flexible and react and like open to reacting as well as being aggressive. I find it very difficult to visualize where people will be in a few moves on a grid. Like, you'd think it would be easy. I'm like, no. I'm like, don't worry, they'll end up like this, and then they don't, and then I get killed. So for me, it's the ability to line up your pieces the way you want them and be able to back out is so crucial. So like this guy, I had this to a limited extent, but certain actions were permanent, such as throwing people and things. Like, I get why, like, you throw somebody, you can't really take back the fact that you threw them. But like, come on, guys, I'm playing a game about a SRPG about a group of people moving through the netherworld where there are penguins who are also explosives. Like, I'm suspending a lot of disbelief. Let me back out my throws. And I would, because for me, I would always throw somebody and then be like, shit. And I realized I'd made a massive mistake and I would have to spend a lot of time course correcting. And I couldn't, and like I found that a lot of SRPGs, like you can't recover from a mistake that bad, and I would make them constantly.
Yeah.
At least, and although, so go ahead.
At least with something like Disgaea, there wasn't permadeath.
Oh yeah, I would not. I don't think I did not play. I had Fire Emblem Awakening. I played it for a little bit, or like the one that was on the GameCube. Was that Awakening?
Oh, Path of Radiance.
Yes, Path of Radiance. I had Path of Radiance. I played it for a little bit, and then the character died, and died permanently, and I was like, well, I guess I'm never touching this game again.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, but like, I don't have the patience for that shit. And also, it's not a feature I've ever seen implemented, but it would be really great to have the ability to scale movement based on how far away your nearest unit is. Like, I always found myself abandoning units at some corner of the map, and by the time I noticed they were so far away, it was not worth spending the time trying to get them to catch up. So if they're like that far away, like allow people to like rubber band a little faster. So like they get like an extra square or two if they're like completely isolated from the rest of the map. And the enemies can have that too. I'm not saying just for the player, just so that you can actually like get your units re-engaged in a reasonable amount of time. Because it's like, okay, well, I guess that entire turn is just people moving in again. Okay.
Yeah, that does happen from time to time, though. What I usually try to do in that scenario is never manually end a turn.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure I move everyone every turn, because if I don't do that, it's easy to let someone lag behind.
Exactly, and like I'm not saying like this is how all SRPGs should be. It's like, no, I will freely admit I am bad at these games. So I play them sometimes, but not very often. And these are just things that would make my life, as somebody who is very bad TM at strategy RPGs, would make my life easier.
Oh, sure. And I think it was one of the strengths of Disgaea having that throwing mechanic, that it often helped you, deal with that movement issue by simply picking up characters that couldn't move as far and throwing them ahead.
Yeah, that was actually I liked that feature. What I didn't like is that I would often throw them and then I'd be like, "Oh shit, I threw them in the wrong spot by accident."
Yeah, that's the downside to that particular thing, which actually leads really well into what my particular essential thing is, which is movement cancellation.
Yep.
Like, you
Let
have
me undo the things.
yes. But particularly movement, because sometimes you need to be able to test what your ranges are going to be. You have to see how different characters on the map line up with each other, because sometimes a big part of SRPGs is blocking off certain areas with basically a wall of units, to prevent either, if you're trying to defend something or prevent a squishy unit from dying, or you're on an escort. Yes, there are escort missions occasionally in these games, and they are the worst. So that's another thing you have to consider. But yeah, just be able to cancel movement. This is why I've never played beyond the first map in the original Final Fantasy Tactics, because the lack of movement cancellation drove me bonkers. It's present.
Yeah.
It's present in every other game I've played in the genre, and I couldn't believe they didn't add it in the PSP remake.
Yeah, like that's a terrible oversight in my opinion, because I'm like, guys, it's a quality of life improvement. Just make it. It's now a standard for the genre.
Yeah, it really is.
You
And
probably shouldn't forego it. It's not a good idea.
no, and it's like it just adds artificial difficulty.
And to me, like as somebody who doesn't play strategy games, I really don't need help.
Yeah, like and even so, like even someone like me who's played a fair number of these games is just like, uh no, don't make me have to try and map every little bit of this in my head. It's bad, and I'm already having to control X number of units. Sometimes it's a ridiculous number, like 10, 12, or even more. Plus having to keep track of where the enemies are, I don't need something else to deal with.
Totally agree.
Yeah. I am sure Final Fantasy Tactics will be remade again at some point, because that's what Square Enix does. So Square Enix, fix it.
Yeah, when you remake Final Fantasy Tactics, please, 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 make those quality of life improvements that would make it, more up to par with what strategy games are today,
Well,
rather than, relying on nostalgia.
yeah, exactly. And like even a lot of older strategy games had that feature too. Like that's the norm for the genre, and like I could forgive it not being in the original, but to not have it in the remake was just bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Um
I agree.
so the second question is, what sort of unit is your favorite to use in SRPGs and why? And Rafe, start us out again.
Okay. I honestly I typically prefer ranged characters in strategy games. I mean, distance attacks for me always tend to make the difference, while, at the same time keeping away from the heavy hitters is always nice. If you can just ping them off, the sooner the better. Doesn't matter if that ranger is using, bows or spells, or being a caster, it doesn't really matter. What you typically I find is that regardless, they come with a good range and decent damage, but at the risk of having mediocre health. So it's typically more of a glass cannon situation with ranged units, but I mean it's kind of fun to live dangerously.
This is something that the Fire Emblem games, particularly the Tellius games, so the GameCube one and the Wii one, did really well because they didn't limit it to archer units and spellcasters. They had things like throwing axes and javelins. And so that was a big way of turning, you could turn almost any unit into a ranged unit, which was enormously helpful, particularly in a game with permadeath where you're trying to avoid dying all the time.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly.
So the ranged characters, like I like ranged characters too, but particularly in these games, they're enormously useful because, unless you're fighting an archer or a mage, they usually tend to give the enemies like just standard distance weapons, not stuff like javelins. So it's a good way to not take damage while beating the crap out of enemies. All right, Irene.
Uh, um, uh, the ones that let you kill things. I don't know. Usually, I'm fond of whichever one is the overpowered one, because then I don't have to think too hard about it. If I screw up, I don't have to start all over again. Because, like, I don't play a lot of the strategy RPGs, as I said. Like Valkyria Chronicles might be my favorite, and it's not exactly like a straightforward strategy RPG. And even then, eventually, it's like scouts forever because you can never catch them. Also, they hit like dump trucks.
That that does help. Usually, if you can marry good damage to good movement, you've got a great unit to work with.
Exactly. And the
Yeah.
scouts had the best movement and eventually had decent damage
Mm-hmm.
in the first Valkyria Chronicles, to the point where you could like solo the map with a few scouts.
Nice.
And like that's sort of like my speed, because it's like, yes, this is easy. Scouts, I win. Let us go.
Yeah. The only risk you run with characters with particularly good movement is getting them stranded far ahead on the map and getting them surrounded. Usually is. I used to have that problem with, I think it was the first Luminous arc
Mm-hmm.
with the ninja chick, Saki, I think her name was. Her movement was so great, but then I would move her too far forward, and
Mm-hmm.
she'd get taken down by a horde of enemy units. Where I was just like, oh, I didn't think that through.
Yeah, the nice thing about Valkyria Chronicles is that if you get in that situation, it's very easy to get yourself out of it as well, because you can just take another turn and move the scout back. Like you can move the same unit over and over again, but at like less and less effectiveness.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah,
that allowed you to backtrack in case you got into a tight spot.
that's useful. Yeah.
I thought so. I'm like, oh well, shit! I've gone too far. I'm gonna backtrack and hide behind some cover on my next turn, so that I'm not totally screwed when the enemy starts.
Excellent.
And I thought that was a good way to balance some of those like more actiony, real time strategy elements with the turn based elements.
Okay, so my favorite sort of unit are the ones I call boulders, as in giant rocks. Usually heavy knight characters or the Lagoos from the Fire Emblem games. The Lagoos are basically like um, beast people that can transform into like a super beast. And the common link here is they are made of hit points and defense.
So you can just throw them out there and be like, okay, hit me.
Exactly. So my favorite role to put these characters in is that I will put them in a choke point on the map, like where I can only fit a unit or two, and it narrows out the oncoming enemy, and then I will have them sit there and be like, okay, I am a boulder, try and move me. And if you've got the right characters picked out for that role, it works beautifully.
Yeah, stick them
Uh,
at a nice choke point, and then
yeah,
just stick the ranged characters behind them.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
oh,
usually a healer.
one more thing. Um, for strategy RPGs, an essential: the ability to turn friendly fire off.
Yes, and in fact, in a lot of them, there isn't friendly fire, thank God.
But like, it's like, yes, I'm going to use my fireball and somehow roast half my team.
Yeah, no, that is not ideal. Uh,
And like, I find that whenever there is friendly fire stuff like that, it just means I don't use that character ever. Because like, well, the situation in which I can use this is not something that I can, very organically set up, because I can't think like that, because I am bad at strategy RPGs, TM.
well, it's not only that, but like if there's friendly fire, it limits the use of the ability
Oh, for sure.
to very specific circumstances. I mean, the most immediate example that comes to mind, though this isn't an SRPG, is Suikoden 3, where all fire magic was, I think, or almost all fire magic, I can't remember now, um, had friendly fire. And
What's
it was dumb. I never use fire magic in that game.
Yeah, wasn't the point like when you picked the person who was gonna get the fire rune, you basically just pick the one with the least spells because he just doesn't get used?
That's how I feel about it. I mean, it's just like, why take the risk? Especially since in that game you don't have direct as you don't have direct control over movement in that game too, so to have friendly fire is just completely ridiculous. In any case, particularly if it's an ability with a large range, like friendly fire just typically makes it unusable.
Yeah, because it's like, oh great, the stars have aligned and I can finally use my level 1 fireball spell. Okay. Like, it's just not worth I would be somewhat more understanding. I was like, this is the best fire spell that has ever existed and will ever exist in this world, but like, it's always like, here's your level 1 fireball. It will roast half your team.
Yeah,
And then
no.
it's like, well, I guess I won't be getting any of those spells, because, like, fuck that.
Well, yeah, particularly when you have an alternative.
Oh, yeah, which is, I think I'll just, use my other team members and their abilities to not kill everybody around them, too.
Yeah, exactly. The
It just basically means that it's like, well, I guess this character's going in the bin.
mhm.
It's always a bit of a problem with strategy RPGs, I find. It's like, this character, I guess, is just going to go in the bin. And then eventually, especially in the ones that are very narrative driven and everybody's like a named character, it's like, well, now you're forced to use this character that you have not used the whole game.
Yeah. If
Inevitably.
if it's a good game, if it's a well-designed game, it normally won't do that to you.
Oh, normally.
And
I'm more
you,
just like griping.
oh, fair enough. Um, Usually, if it does happen, it's one unit and you can kind of work around it. But it's yeah, I much prefer ones where they don't dictate which units you have to take with you beyond maybe like the protagonist.
Yeah, like, case in point, I actually stopped playing Valkyria Chronicles the first time around
Mm.
because of this one mission where it's just you and Alicia. So, like, I can't remember the protagonist's name off the top of my head. It's just the two of you, two scouts, nothing else. You're injured, so you are moving much slower than before
Oh, joy.
against a bunch of basically scout murderers. Like, these units are designed to kill scouts. That's what they're good at.
Yeah.
And you have to, like, maneuver in such a way as to not get spotted and go around them and sneak.
Mm.
But there's no support, and if you get seen, it's over. You cannot fight them. So, like, and I did that mission like 10 times, kept getting killed in the same goddamn spot. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm done. You know?
Yeah, fair enough. There's often if I quit one, it'll be because of a ridiculous map like that one. All right. So on to the third and final question.
Oh god, there's a third?
Do you prefer to play SRPGs portably or on home console, and why? Rafe, start us out.
Console all the way. While portability does have its advantages, like I get easily distracted when I'm on the go. And at that point, I'm going to make a critical error. So when I'm at home, I may still get some distractions, but I feel like I can put a lot more focus into what I'm doing. And I don't think there's a way around it. Like if strategy was the only option, or sorry, if portable was the only option, then sure, I'll take it. That's fine. But if I have a choice, it'll be home.
Fair enough. Irene?
Portable. Complete opposite. So when I'm home, I kind of never feel like a strategy game. It's just never in my, like, high on my list of things to play. I'd rather reserve my home console time for games that need the extra power to render, like, the big graphics and the lasers and the big action sequences, right? Stuff I need all 60 of those frames in order to play competently, like a Neo. Because,
Mm.
like, I have played both. I played Neo on both the PS4 and the PC, and I am saddened to say this, but those extra frames per second on the PC that I can manage to squeeze out meant that I had a much better time playing it. There's just a lot of, like, really nitty gritty things I need to pay attention to, and those extra frames mean I have more advanced warning that something's coming at my face. So I prefer to have my strategy games like portable titles, like Luminous Arc for the DS. which might be the only strategy game I think I've ever completed. Come to think of it.
It is a good one.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. I think it might be the only one I've ever actually finished.
Yeah.
And I like being able to like sort of pick it up and put it down where I need to.
Yeah. No, fair enough. As for me, while I have played plenty of strat games on portable devices, I prefer them on home console simply because the big screen helps me keep track of everything, see all the details. This might be because my eyesight's kind of crap, but it's also easier for me to stay comfortable when I'm playing on the TV. Like, I'm not leaning my head forward. I don't have my hands up. I can sit comfortably. And I get sucked into these games so hard. Like, I don't really pay attention to anything else while I'm playing these games. They just suck me in completely. So I'm not paying attention to my posture. But if I can sit in my comfy chair in a comfy position, then my back is happy, I'm happy. All is well in the universe.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I like things being well in the universe.
There's another question I just thought of, which seems like an obvious one, but what are your favorite what's your favorite SRPG you've played? Do you guys know yours?
Oof.
I'd have to say it's Valkyria Chronicles, even though I didn't finish it. I just really like the hybrid battle system. Plus, I like the way that it focuses on, little almost human interest stories
Oh yeah.
as part of this like greater like it's basically set in like World War One, World War Two times, right? Like a fictional Europe.
Right.
Similar, and it's nice to see like these little stories that are more human and less about the scale of the conflict, and you get like a sort of like micro story about this one unit and what they were fighting for, and get to know actually intimately all the characters.
Yeah, good stuff. Mine probably would be Suikoden Tactics because it's Suikoden.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna say like shocker.
I mean, there's been I have played some really, really excellent games, but perhaps but if I disregard the Suikoden factor, my favorite probably would be Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. But it also has a little bit of Suikoden factor in the fact that it's this massive political story with these focuses on different cultures interacting and coming together. And plot-wise, though not gameplay-wise, it feels very much like a Suikoden story. And I absolutely adore the protagonist of Path of Radiance. Ike is wonderful, and the fact that I can play Ike in Smash Ultimate is just makes my life just so beautiful. Rafe?
I was originally gonna say Suikoden Tactics out of all of them myself, but you already kind of got there, beat me to
No,
it, of
if you're
course.
speaking in tactics, then
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was expecting you to say Jeanne d'Arc.
Jeanne d'Arc comes close. That's an amazing game.
Uh,
Just awe-inspiringly original.
Yeah, I think for me, and while I've never officially finished one, it's still probably Disgaea.
Mm.
I like the cartoony nature of it, and it's got everything amped up to 11. And that's something that I think is really great for a strategy role play. Just taking this mechanic and amping it up by making ridiculous level caps, by making ridiculous damage totals that can be caused if you decide to put enough time and effort into it. It I don't know. It's just something about it that even though I would probably never take the time to grind that hard, it's just it's such a novel idea.
Oh, sure. And I think it's a big part of why the games became, so popular. Uh,
Hmm.
I think,
I think that's actually almost necessary for a strategy game to really stand out. Is there needs to be something that's like a little bit different from the other titles, you know?
oh, sure.
Like you've got to have that like ridiculous level cap or sort of blended mechanics or something unique that the other strategy games don't necessarily do. Otherwise, it's in danger of getting lost in the noise a little bit, you know?
Yeah, and it is still a very niche genre in a lot of ways. So,
Especially since like it's very easy to like you spend all of your time in those maps. All of your gameplay time is in those maps.
yeah,
So there's not a lot of opportunities for you to branch out and show off different aspects of the game. So if you need to have that mechanical hook to really make your game stand out, I find.
sure. So, take it from here, Rafe.
All right. Well, that wraps up this episode. Thank you so much, Sky, for putting all the material together for this one. I think it was a good conversation all around.
Yep.
You're welcome.
All right. Well,
I just wish I had more
Irene,
to
if you
contribute.
well, it happens, and I was just gonna say, like, Irene, if you ever have like an episode idea you want to spearhead, that's something we can definitely look into.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll have to think about it. Get
yeah,
you guys
yeah,
on your toes about a genre you guys don't play that often.
yeah. No, that's totally fine. We'll see what we can put together for that. All right. Well, that's it for us. So as always, we are on Twitter. I'm at Billionaires XP. Sky, what about you? Where are you?
I'm at Skyknight XP.
And I am at irogue_XP on Twitter, as well
Excellent.
as irogue_XP on Twitch every Thursday.
Perfect. So everyone definitely check out those Twitch streams. And again, if you like what you're listening to, we are on Coffee, so please feel free to check out the page at the very least and give us a donation if you like it. Coffee.com/xpbillionaires.
And
All
our
right.
website is
Well,
XP Billionaires at xpbillionaires.wordpress.com.
yes, definitely. Yes, guys put in a lot of work on that. I feel bad that I keep forgetting about it. Uh, Well, thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye!